rise up, sweet family dear. The time of the Lord and remembering love is here. Love is all you'll say if you'll awake and rise up right away.
Welcome, everybody, to what was once called Kundalini Without the Cult podcast, and what is now going to be called Rise Up with Guru Singh and Tiago Prem. And I was reminiscing on the days of walking with you at Solstice and singing that Rise Up song, and how special those times were, and how that wake up, rise up, whatever you want to call it, is so essential for today. And I came to you and said, hey, what do you think about calling it Rise Up? And you said,
I said, yeah, let's rise up, sweet family dear. Yo.
I love it. We're going to have to use that song now for like the intro music.
Yeah, let's do it. I have a good recording of it.
All right. I love it. So this is now episode 1, I guess, then of Rise Up. And you can go back and listen to the other episodes. There's some great material in there. And I was talking with you, Guru Singh, about just some things that have been happening in my life, and you were sharing some things in your life. And then we've been noticing a pattern in the lives of other people close to us and what's happening in the world. And you had suggested that we record an episode called The Other Side of Dread, which I think is a great idea. And so that's where we're going today. So with this intro, do you want to share a little bit about what inspired that?
Yeah, every emotion in our physical, emotional, mental world, emotions come out of our physiology and they affect our mental focus and clarity. So that emotional body sits between the physical body and the mental bodies. And dread is one of the emotions. Not everybody calls what they're feeling dread. So just understand that, dread can be depression, it can be sadness, it can be so many different things, because emotions are not like exact measurements. They're an opinion, they're a subjective feature. Some people that are in dread or in depression or in sadness all the time, to them, that's not an emotional state. That's what they would call normal. But what we're experiencing, as you just indicated, what we're experiencing right now is that there's so much uncertainty in the world, with, politics and economics and wars, all of these, that what we end up with is we end up with a lot of people going into, because the world is globally oriented now with social media, etc., a lot of people simultaneously going into identical identities, identical emotional states. And one of the states that, as you indicated, in talking with people that are around us, one of the states that people are finding quite frequently is dread, depression, sadness, uncertainty, etc., etc. And so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about how it's a tool rather than a reformative sentence. It's not like, okay, you've been bad, so I'm sentencing you to a month of dread, or a month of depression, or a month of sadness. It's just part of the toolbox, the emotional toolbox. So today we're going to talk about what it is, what it's like, what it feels like, how widespread it is, and some of the technologies that can shift it change it, alter it, relieve it, etc. So, yeah, I'll leave it there. We'll go on.
Mhm. Yeah, that's an important thing to is have some tools to manage where you're at and to know that things are going to shift essentially. I was thinking while you were talking about that, like about emotions, and like there has to be a reason why we're able to experience all of the emotions, including the ones that are uncomfortable. They're performing like a biological function in a sense. Isn't it true? Like it's like to prepare you for something so that you can move out of the way or stand up to it or place yourself. I know you used to always say this saying, it might be from the Tao Te Ching, I'm not sure, or Lao Tzu or something, where it's like, when the arrow appears, be not present, or
Yeah,
something. Yeah.
yeah. And the emotional body is like is like the dashboard of life. You know, when you're in your car, on your dashboard are all the various measurements. How much gas do you have? What's your oil pressure? What's your engine temperature? You know, and all of these are important for you to um, be successful in that journey. In the journey of life, emotions are gauges on the dashboard of our existence. And rather than looking at a gas gauge and seeing that, you know, the little orange light goes on, right? The only orange light that exists in your entire vehicle is that warning that you probably only have, 10 or 15 miles until you run out of gas. And, let's just say that that orange light is like dread or sadness or depression or whatever we want to call it. Well, the other side of that is the determination to go on to your GPS and ask it, where is the closest petrol station, right? Where is the closest fuel outlet so that I can refuel my vehicle? But unlike the car, which we understand is a separate entity from our existence, so often people consider their physical body, their emotional body, even their mental body as being them. I am sad is a mistaken statement. You know, my system is experiencing sadness. That would be a more accurate statement. When you get cold or when you get hungry, you'll say things like, I'm freezing. No, you're not. I'm starving. No, you're not.
Hmm.
They're expressions that, by the way, the subconscious takes quite literally, and yet you're saying them somewhat virtually. And so the accumulation of these statements and these attitudes and these opinions, for example, when you're struck with dread, depression, deep, deep sadness, you know, a lot of the time it feels like this is never going to change,
Hmm.
you know, or I've got to do something drastic in order for this to shift. But in fact, oftentimes, if you look at it as one amongst many gauges on the dashboard of your life, you will notice that you don't necessarily always have to make a dramatic shift in order to resolve the indicator light. You may just have to take a slightly different route for a few miles and stop at a petrol station, get out and fill up your tank. And then this horribly threatening condition of dread isn't really horrible and it's not really threatening. It's just an indicator that we need to shift course ever so slightly.
When I teach people how to stand on their hands, like a handstand or anything upside down, like we're not used to using our hands like feet. And you could say this too, like standing on one leg too would make sense. But I always tell students who are learning to do these balancing postures to make small movements with balance. Because if you make a big movement, you'll throw the whole thing off.
Mm.
But if you learn to get really subtle in your movement, like change the way you're using your fingers or like shift your shoulders a little bit forward, like these small moves, it brings everything into alignment so you can balance, you know. But it's so interesting when you watch somebody who's new to doing that, they're afraid because it's like, I could fall on my head, or I could fall over and hurt my back, or I could, or they just want to be in control because they don't feel safe. And so they make these big moves to try and like somehow calm that feeling of uncertainty. But then an
That
experienced person makes small moves, and then you're still feeling uncertain, but you have the tools to go, like you're saying, oh, that's just the orange light, I need to get fuel, or oh, that's just the weight moving forward, I just need to push into my fingers. And there's a metaphor in there.
Yeah, a handstand is a perfect metaphor because there's no one that does a handstand that just becomes totally rigid. The blood is moving through the body. The center of gravity is continuously shifting in our physical bodies. And it's never more obvious than when you're doing a handstand or when you're standing on one leg. And it's just, how do we respond to the uncertainty? And dread, depression, deep sadness is simply a demonstration that there is uncertain times present. And a really good handstander takes that message of uncertain times are present, and as you say, makes microscopic adjusting motions. Someone who is not as skilled or accustomed to the sense of that particular uncertainty will make the oh my gosh kind of changes, which, as you've indicated, will throw everything off and lead to a fulfillment of prophecy, right? I knew I was going to fall down, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, then there's a story perpetuated that could carry on for quite some time.
Yeah. And there's also the sensation in the emotions such as depression, deep sadness, dread, that it's a sentence assigned, like a convicted sentence, right?
Right.
It's a sentence that is assigned based on something wrong that has been done in the recent or distant past. I'm suffering because, or I'm suffering because, and that's not necessarily, it is sometimes applicable, but oftentimes the sadness, the depression, the dread is nothing more than a road sign saying, steep grade ahead, test your brakes.
Right.
that you don't want to go on the steep grade until you've tapped your brakes a few times to make sure that you've still got them,
Mhm.
and that you will be needing to use them periodically as you go down this next period of your life. And so rather than being alarmed at our various emotional constituents, we need to be informed. What is depression informing me of? What is sadness informing me of? What is dread informing me of? When someone in our life passes away or becomes extremely ill, if we can sit with the emotions that we experience, we can be of much greater value to the circumstance, both more greater value to ourselves and greater value to those around us. And so when we came up with the idea of the title, The Other Side of Dread, it's almost as if dread is a point in space, and the other side of it is all of the other space that exists.
Mhm.
And it's not advising in this podcast that you exit dread by jumping out of it. You literally sit in it until it dissolves around you, which is what the Buddha said, that any emotion that you experience long enough will ultimately turn into joy. And so each one of these emotional gauges on the dashboard of our life is a set of messages. Like I was saying, it's steep hill ahead, or as you were describing, you're on your hands, you're not on your feet. Make microscopic shifts whenever you feel an imbalance taking place.
Another thing with that analogy of balancing on the hands that I've noticed that people do, and we can take this to the experience of dread or difficult emotions or conditions or circumstances, is that in a state of panic, they'll bend their elbows.
Hmm.
And the interesting thing is, like, your face is like 2 feet from the floor, and all of your weight is stacked up above your face. And probably the last thing you want to do is bend your elbows. And hopefully, this is the grace piece, I guess. Hopefully, that there's somebody there with you that you trust who's showing you how to do this thing. And that when you bend your elbows, they grab hold of your legs before you get a surprise.
Yeah, before you get what would be called a serious face plant.
That's right. And I was thinking about, while you were talking there, like those uncomfortable sensations that come out of dread from the conditions, but also like the physical sensations. I remember talking to you years ago about a challenging time in my life, and you talked about like feeling acid in the muscles. And when you feel that, notice if you can like breathe or say a prayer or do something before like that sensation in the body comes out as some kind of like harmful expression. You know what I mean? And sometimes, like, I would say, even, you don't want to feel that because it feels terrible. But in some ways, like, that is grace. Like, that is an opportunity for you to make a change or to shift a pattern. And it might take you a bunch of times to get it. It certainly has me. I always say, like, I'm like in the remedial class. Like, it takes me 100 times of hitting myself on the head before I'm like, maybe you shouldn't hit yourself on the head. And it's like, oh yeah, cool, thanks for that. But then looking back, you think, those difficult moments, when I'm in that space of possibilities that you described, like the gateway into that was the dread, or was uh the experience of really being uncomfortable. And then the breakthrough is or like the wisdom. That's probably a good choice of words. Wisdom comes from recognizing that even the discomfort is grace or an opportunity to expand or grow, or and to me that is the other side, because I look at my life and I look at, you know, how far I've come along, you know, as a person, as a father, as a business person, as somebody who holds space and supports other people in their healing process. Like, man, I've come a long way. And the big growth moments all happened in times of difficulty. Interrupt this program to tell you a little bit about the 13 Moon Studio. So, the 13 Moon Studio is a community based space online where you can practice with Guru Singh and with 1,000 other members in our community. It's a great place to gain accountability in your practice, learn new techniques, and do live classes with Guru Singh. You can become a member today by going to the 13moons.studio and giving it a try. We'd love to see you there. Now back to the show.
You brought up the response or reaction to uncertainty on a handstand of bending the elbows. And this is the polarity. This is the exact opposite of what we want to do in those moments of significant uncertainty. Because bending the elbows is an act of withdrawing. It's an act of pulling it all back in, because it's dangerous. So I want to pull it all back in. But as you said, that's probably one of the reasons why, mystics and yogis have been, doing handstands for millennia, because it was such a great teacher of what to do in those moments of uncertainty. Because in the moments of uncertainty, your greatest state of safety is in full extension. The hands and arms want to feel like they're extended to the center of the earth. And the legs and the feet want to feel like they're extended to the highest point in the sky. So that all you are is that thread between the center of the earth and the furthest point in the sky or in the heavens. That you're just that string on the instrument of life that's vibrating. You're not this creature that is uncertain in this minuscule little space. You are the you're the entirety of your existence. And so when we experience dread, depression, deep sadness, etc., to be able to extend into it rather than withdraw from it, rather than try to avoid it, rather than to try to run away from it, we just extend into it. And then suddenly what we experience is, when I extend into this, it's not overwhelming. It's just a part of a very complex picture. It's like you can't write a page that at the end of every sentence is a question mark. And so don't be so hung up on a sensation as to feel that it has to be used. The last time I was uncertain, I felt depressed, I felt sad, I felt dread, and I managed to get through it okay. So let me use that tool. Let me use that tool. And people will become patterned, habitual in going into these reactions to the uncertainty. And let's face it, we're all in growth mode. Those of us on a soul-based path. And so we're going to be consistently in uncertain moments. And therefore, if we tend to have a go-to like dread or sadness or depression or whatever that might be called, every time we're in unfamiliar, then we're going to be consistently unimpressive, because we're going to be consistently depressed, in dread, in sadness, because now we're using it as a safety mechanism, as kind of a life ring. And if I hold on to my dread, I know that in the past I've gotten through these uncertain moments. I don't want to try anything new because I haven't tried that yet. I haven't found it to be successful. But I know. And that is why depression, dread, and deep sadness are literally pandemic at this moment. Because the times on earth are so profoundly uncertain. I mean, even stable governments, even stable economies, even stable religious circumstances, even all of the spiritual paths. It's why we called the original podcast Kundalini Without the Cult, because, you know, the Kundalini world, you know, from 1969 until, you know, the year 2000, 2004, that world suddenly was careened into a disastrous challenge based on a scandal. So the uncertainty is everywhere. There is no safe haven except what I called the technology of moving through the uncertain response mechanisms, which are depression and dread and deep sadness and the other emotions. Sit with them in a meditative practice and allow yourself to have the full experience, not just a partial. If there is a person in a room that is causing a disturbance, if you allow that person to fully share what they want desperately to share, they will relax into a more congenial and group orientation. Same thing holds true for the emotional body. When we have an emotion that is being unwieldy, hard to manage, if we allow it to fully express itself, it will feel that acceptance, that energy of acceptance, and it will stop being such a bother. And that's how I faced the scandals, because the scandals created a tremendous uncertainty in the world of Kundalini.
Mm.
And my wife and I just looked at each other and said, okay, what's required of us is a significant admission that we were asleep at the wheel, and a sincere apology for having been asleep at the wheel, and then immediately follow up with, we may have been asleep at the wheel, but the road that we're traveling on is the right road. Being asleep at the wheel and having some people in the vehicle that were acting totally inappropriately, scandalously, unethically, immorally. That has nothing to do with the road. That has to do with the passengers in the vehicle. The road of all of these circumstances, whether it's Kundalini, whether it's the world's current economic situation, the world's current political, the current spiritual, the current religious, whatever it is, this is the road that we have all been assigned to. There's nothing faulty about the road. The key is, don't be asleep when you're supposed to be awake. Sleep when it's time to sleep, but when it's time to be awake, be fully awake. And what that means is with all of these bothersome emotional sensations that tend to come in, such as dread, go into them. Explore them fully. Document them. Understand them for what they actually are. There's signage on the path, on the road. There are indicator lights on the dashboard. If you're not asleep at the wheel, you'll be able to see these indicators. You'll be able to see the road signs. You'll be navigating life in a very, very, very good way. So, right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab some walnuts and I'm going to open the door and I'm going to feed one of our many, many squirrels that live on our property. Hold on.
Okay.
That squirrel is looking at me up on its hind legs, looking at me through the window of the French door.
That's awesome. Snack break for the squirrels.
The other day, they take them out of our hands. They take the walnuts out of our hands, but they usually take them out with their teeth and their lips. The other day, my wife was giving a squirrel, and it reached forward with its lips, and as it was getting the walnut out of her hand, it took its hand and just held on to her finger.
That's cute.
I mean, when you experience that level of accountability and connectivity, phew, it's really rewarding.
It's beautiful. I was thinking about while you were talking, in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, they talk about these like hindrances or afflictions, not a great English word for it, but these like blocks that come up that prevent us from experiencing yoga, which essentially is like experiencing your true nature, which would cause you to do something like be kind to a squirrel. But one of the first ones, it is the first one that the writer suggests, is that like you forget who you are. Like the primordial cause of disease is forgetting who you are. And I think that's an important thing to remember here, because the dread, the experience of sadness, depression, etc., as you're saying, that's not who you are, but it can be pretty convincing. And when you're caught up in that, you could start believing that that's who you are. And so when you have a yoga practice, which means practicing whatever it takes to experience who you are, that's what we're doing, is we're going, yeah, I have these feelings and it's okay. Like it's a normal thing to have those feelings, and that's not who I am. And I can connect with something underneath that. And there's a lot of ways to do it. I mean, you could share some of the ways that you do it. I mean, for me, practicing in the morning makes a really big difference for me. Just to start with that foundation of like not just going with whatever I feel right when I wake up. And then doing things like I shared with you, I learned about you take a shower, and as you're having the shower, you like close your eyes and you feel the water on your skin, and you just notice like that there's water, and you might see colors or whatever light, or you might just be half asleep. And then in that space while the water is on your skin, you just think about like, what do I need for today? Like, how, what do I just based on that sensation? And it sounds like such a simple like thing, like, oh yeah, I can do that, whatever. But I found that practice to be incredibly profound. Like it tunes me into something. Like it doesn't tell me like, yeah, you need to worry about all this, that, or the other thing. Like that's never the message that comes through. And I'm a father, and I got to pay the rent and the bills like everybody else. And I have things that I'm concerned about in the world, etc. But in that moment, like I get a message that comes through real clear, and it doesn't require much else than getting out of bed and cleaning my body and being open to receive a message. So I found that to be really helpful. And then, the things we talk about, meditation, yoga, also like listening to something for me that helps a lot, that really inspires me, whether it's music or one of my favorite teachers, just to like set the tone of like, everything's going to be all right, like Bob Marley, you know, or one good thing about music is when it hits, you feel no pain. There's some profound lines. And those are simple things. And, maybe there are some things that you could share that you do to help see the other side of dread.
Yeah, the squirrel is needing a little additional.
The
Just,
second
just a
course.
moment. This is literally the other side of its needs right now. Hold
I
on.
love it. Yeah. Oh. It's perfect. Perfect timing.
So connected. It just, I opened the door. It just came right up to my hand and looked me in the eye, and then looked down and saw that I had a handful and just took one right out. It's like so cool.
Love it.
Yeah, yeah. One of the things that being a musician, one of the things that I find is that composing music is very, very helpful.
Mhm.
So if any of you out there are musicians, first thing of the day, if you just pick up your instrument and allow it to communicate through just sound, nonverbal sound. Another thing that I find, as you indicated, is that water is because water is a solution. And when you have a problem, you want a solution. And so when you're in water at the beginning of the day, um, your body is experiencing, as you were indicating, the sensations of solution. And the body has a tremendous intelligence. And when you allow your body to experience solution, then the hormones and the peptides and the lipids and the proteins that the body parts are going to be secreting, microdosing you throughout the day, are going to be more solution oriented. So if you set this up as a pattern, that at the beginning of the day you get into water, then your body starts to work from that pattern, knowing that, oh, the most important thing to my occupier, so to speak, because you're not your body, The
Mhm.
most important thing to my occupier is solution. So let me orient myself to serve my occupier. Let me orient myself towards solution. And so throughout the day, your body will be secreting from all of the cells, whether they're bone, marrow, muscle, nerve, glandular, whatever cells they are, it will be secreting the mixture that orients towards solution. The subconscious is very much tuned in to what is your habit, what is your habitat, where do you live? And if you live the majority of your time in a particular emotional construct, a particular emotional temperament, then the subconscious will believe that the occupier prefers that modality. And so when you have built up a habit, let's say of dread, then it's going to take a while of producing counter indicators so that you are no longer demonstrating the desire to be in dread or the desire to be in depression or even the desire to respond to unfamiliarity or uncertainty with a dreadful state. And so we can literally train our own subconscious, which controls our entire body process. So if the subconscious trains the body process and the body process controls the emotional states, then that creates a cycle, a circle, that we force a particular emotional state into a circumstance and we do it with consistency, then that's over time through repetition indicating to the subconscious, which both the subconscious and the emotional body both root into the solar plexus here at the intersection of the sternum and the diaphragm. And so, and that nerve ganglia there, that plexus. And so when you start to enforce a particular attitude and overcome the internal accusations of you're being phony, you should authentically feel your feelings. Yes, you should authentically feel your feelings, but don't dwell in your feelings. Don't maintain them. Because sometimes when you're feeling your feelings, you're not just feeling the feelings, you're actually maintaining them. And so you want to begin to understand the difference between experiencing and maintaining the feeling body. And as you begin to come to that realization, when you have fully felt an emotion and you don't need to maintain it any further, that's when you can begin to enforce an alternative. And it's not being phony and it's not being inauthentic, it's actually being constructive. And so when you enforce an alternative emotion, you know, certain things have been going on, certain things have been going on. You know, maybe you'll reach an explosion point and you'll just cascade into this, you know, sincere expression, right? To use more to use less violent terms. You cascade into a sincere expression of your frustration and then go not, oh, that was wrong, that was bad. No, go, that was an indicator. All right. What is that indicating? Okay, that's indicating that we have been doing what we have been doing, or I've been doing what I've been doing I need to do something different. I need to make those micro adjustments. I'm standing on my hands. I'm feeling imbalanced. I have to make those micro adjustments so that I don't throw the whole ship off course, so that I don't
Mhm.
end up with a good old face plant, on my yoga mat.
Mhm.
And so this is something, and it takes time to build new emotional habits, to build new emotional constructs. And another thing that's important for all of us to understand is that not all of our emotions are ours. A lot of our emotional body is made up of the epigenetics of generations in our past, all of our parents, grandparents, great grandparents, and so on through 14 generations, in which the DNA is alive with the epigenetic echoes, if you will. So, this, what we've been talking about and what we've been discussing around, are a lot of the indicators and a lot of the ways in which you can respond to them. And we've given you a few really good, responses. And let me just walk through some very simple um, mood shifting responses. One is to just become aware of your breath. And a good breath to become aware of, to initiate with, is what's known as that rapid intentional breathing, sometimes called breath of fire. But, breath of fire is just an expression. But it's a rapid intentional breathing, emphasis on the exhale. And what you do is you push the belly in as the exhale goes out, you push the belly out as the inhale comes in. And so it's, if that's too severe, do the 5 element breath, which is like that at about a reduction of maybe 1 to 4. So it becomes, and then once you've done that for, say, a minute, either that rapid intentional breath or the 5 element breath, then shift over to just really mindful, long breathing. You can inhale through your nose, exhale through your nose. You can inhale through your nose, exhale through your lips. It's good to inhale in these particular instances through your nostrils, because that will give you a balance of both the right and the left hemisphere as you bring it in through the 2 nostrils and it goes up into the sinus cavity, where it merges into that the frequency of the limbic system of your brain, right? And descending down into the lungs and the heart. So if you can do this, again, you've done the more rapid breathing for a minute. If you can do this for 2 minutes, 3 minutes, it's going to bring you more in connection with the governance of your feeling body. Whether or not that governance wants to feel a feeling more deeply or more completely, or whether it wants to shift the feeling. And so that's breath. Another thing is to sing or to chant. Some of you are skilled at chanting mantra. Mantras in Sanskrit, mantras in Gurmukhi, mantras in Hebrew, mantras in Aramaic, mantras in your native tongue. Whatever the mantra or affirmation is. Another thing is what my dear brother Tiaga Prem was indicating, some really significant yoga stretching, and really getting in full extension of the body glove, so that you're in your body, because the body is secreting the chemistry, the blood chemistry that is enabling and enacting your emotions. And so when you fully occupy your body glove, your body, however you want to refer to it, you're more in touch with what your body is indicating to you. And so it's of value to do breath work, to do sound work, to do body work. Also, getting a massage, also listening to great music, as Tiago Prem indicated. You know, you can go on YouTube and you can find all of these incredible musical compositions in these various sacred tunings, you know, 328, 332, 317, 528, you know, all of these different bass tunings. And just turn it on and let it be in the background or let it be the only thing that you're focused on. So many different ways of being able to work with the emotional body and enabling the emotional body to become your toolbox rather than your fool box.
Yeah, and want to add a extra double click there for you, or an extra double exclamation on the fact that these things take time, and you probably learn a lot from making mistakes along the way too. You know, when I was I'm a sober person, and when I was stopping drinking, I had this like routine of like after a hard day, like opening a can of beer in an aluminum can, even like the sound of it and the feel of it in my hand. And there's like this whole pattern, like you're saying, like you become in this pattern of dread, is like the pattern of like the reward at the end of the hard day. And I just knew that the pattern of drinking alcohol wasn't serving my life. And I wanted to stop, but that like pattern was so hard to break. And in early in my sobriety, I was drinking non-alcoholic beer, and like a lot of them. And some people like in AA were like, "Oh, you shouldn't do that. It's too close to like the real thing," and yada yada. And I inside I was like, I just need to do this for a little bit. And like, you know, you could ask my partner SJ, like, I drank a ton of these things at the beginning. And then over time, I started having less and less. And to the point now, like, I like to have a cold, like mineral water, something that's fizzy. It's the same sensation. It's like cold, and it's comes in a container, and I get to hear the sound and everything. And you know, when and she started to see the shift when I was doing that. And somebody said like, "Oh, you drink the non-alcoholic beers," and she said, "Oh yeah, they're just like real beers, but without the stupid." It was so good. But the point being that, you know, I had this intention of like how I wanted to show up. And I think that's common for people who are like going through a difficult time, where it's like, I don't want to show up this way. Like, I don't want, whatever that is, I don't want to feel like this, or I don't want to act like this, or I don't want to. And they have a genuine desire to make a shift. And so they start doing the things, some of the things we described today, the breath, the sound, even like getting out to nature for a walk before you have a difficult conversation, or putting things on pause, that kind of thing. And it takes a while for that habit to become like a natural thing for you. But then, like, when it happens, it's like, oh, yeah, I see. And then, you know, you don't end up clinging to the tool that helped you so much. You recognize that, like, you have the capacity to do these things. And all it really takes is a desire to do it. And then, like, try to go. And at the beginning, my teacher Dharma, he told me this. He said, when you're a beginner, you need to have angry determination. That's the language that he used. And he said, when they teach young monks to sit in meditation in Tibet, they tell them like you have to like use the energy of anger to be able to sit still. But then he told me that the challenge is not to stay there. Like you use, you know, your willpower or whatever it is, like strong faith, to do the thing. And then as you do it, you can kind of soften. It's like, I don't need to drink a million non-alcoholic beers. I don't even drink them anymore, but they serve their purpose. Or like fighting to stay in the handstand where you're like shaking, want to bend your elbows, or whatever it is that you're going through. Like you notice you don't want to speak to your partner that way anymore. You start to do these things that will create the shift. And at the beginning, it requires like a, like a, he told me you got to growl even when you're a beginner. But over time, you can just soften and allow that pattern to unfold. And that to me was really valuable information. And even people who are young in sobriety, to me, they say like, oh, you've been sober for so long. Like, I just wonder what would it feel like to be sober for like a year? And you have to remind those people like, yeah, it feels great, but don't even worry about that. Like, just one day at a time, focus where you are now. What can you do today? At the end of the day, when your head touches the pillow, say thank you that you had another day sober, and do those things that support you in whatever your goal is. Doesn't have to be sobriety, but whatever you want to, whatever difficulty you're facing. You have somebody who's sick in your family, um, you know, financial challenges. You want to change your diet because you're tired of feeling sick and tired, whatever it might be. It requires this like steadiness of showing up and even like listening to programs like this or other great podcasts and that inspire you. Like, just fill your world with these things that give you the like grit to show up and do this thing. And then over time, it won't feel like such a fight. And it might feel like a fight at the beginning. And I think that's necessary. It's like we started with the handstand. It's like when you start doing that, like you got to develop your muscles and you got to learn like how this thing works, and you got to learn not to make such big adjustments. And even falling over is a part of learning how to stand up. And then over time, it will become a natural thing until the next challenge. And then you go through the same process essentially.
So we want to thank you for joining us. This has been an exploration of so many valuable remedies and techniques that you can use in experiencing what we all experience, which
Mhm.
is dread and sadness and depression and uncertainty, particularly. And we touched on something here with Tiaga Prem was talking about, and that is the stages of growth. The first ones being, that angry determination, and then moving on into more of a at easement. And so that will be our next podcast, will be the simple stages of growth, and how not every great teacher knows how to teach, because they've been so far away from that very beginning nature that they've forgotten about it. So many of the great teachers will say, oh, you don't need to do that. And really, you do when you're starting out, and they've just forgotten it. And so we'll explore that venue the next time around. So we really want to thank you for joining us on the other side of dread.
Yeah, for sure. So this is the Rise Up podcast with Guru Singh and Tiago Prem. Please, if you like the show, like it, share it with your friends, leave any comments or questions down below, and I'll answer all of them, no matter what they might be. So please take the time to do that. And if you'd like to practice with us, as I mentioned in other episodes, accountability is really important. We have a global community at the 13moons.studio. You can come be a part of the work we do there. Lots of breath work, meditation, sound, wisdom. It's an incredible community that happens all over the world. You can tune in from your computer. Plus, we have teacher trainings. If you want to do a deep dive, you can look into those at kundaliniuniversity.com. And we'll see you next time on Rise Up with Guru Singh and Tiago Prem.
Rise up, sweet family dear. time of the Lord and remembering love is here. Love, love is all you'll say if you'll awake and rise up right away.